아니 대체도 안 배자줘서 랍잖아 수치도 납선 나와래 신고를 심어를 투고 투지 쇼만로 가지고도 아니 가서 봐봐 다 간자 아니 지 가서다 다 로종이 깨었다고 아니 가서래 계속 좀 쉬어라 그래서 준주비 안 대신 팀이 얘기해서도 어디다 공부하자.
So that we set our motivation as we normally do to really do whatever we possibly can to attain the purest state of enlightenment in order to perfectly benefit sentient beings. To do this, we know we have to perfect all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To train in them efficiently, we need to have a good understanding of them. And we need to gain that understanding by gaining a good education in what they are about. And we can only do this by being able to rely on a reliable source. It is with this in mind that we have this morning really the King of Mind training texts in the form of the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, as composed by the great Bodhisattva Shantideva. So, as usual, also we start the visualization in the space in front of the one who is skilled in means, greatly compassionate, the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, who is in fact our own root guru, taking on the aspect of the historical Shakyamuni Buddha, who has one face and two hands. He's seated in the Vajra posture with the right hand in the earth-touching mudra and the left hand holding an alms bowl filled with nectar in the meditative equipoise posture. He is marked at the crown with an om, at the throat by an a, and at the heart by a hum syllable. From that hum syllable, countless rays of light emanate, going out into the pure world, inviting all of the wisdom beings and the empowering deities from those realms. The wisdom beings dissolve into the central figure. The empowering deities confer the nectar of empowerment, the sum of which overflows at the crown, and the figure of Achovia spontaneously appears. That we ourselves are surrounded by all kind mother sentient beings.
And it's some jet that Tanjaja, and a dinner said they were Lama to be on Bola, and she got the random Chibachijan and the Tawai Tawai chicken, the Mondo with the you can and the Becuso to you and then to get some town. What are Raji Batanja, Shanty, what to a college or Kuna to the Penta Mata Tamja turns again. And Tanja, Narangu to the Tuja, Naranzu to the Lala, Naranzu to the Mombasa. Sanjay, that Sankia, what the Naranzu Chedi in Bachitaka, Chidana Yeba read the inner rank in water betona. To mix it with Jawa Yobach. Yobati, mix it with Jawa Yobati, Yobati water betona, what it is Chimbo in and Chicaso the nearby because of that Chilla Julieta and Chicaso the Mishiba Mombasa and the Kacho Nivashucha, you good one. what the general, what the comparison, and the laser, and the beg you in there, maybe, and a target of each other, what to whatever. And the same jacket to win natural, and a chick, Mr. Nije. And the data to make Judah Javas and a chimera, Java Shocha, Java target again. The water, the way Judah was then a chimera, the more Judah, the was short, the target again, the general Lama to be chingle Latus, when I call it Chigato, that Jamato was several, and the jet to a new solution, send it to Lamla Mubas of Sanja. Kongo combat Mato, Tomato, Kongo combat Juana, Kiji Rene, Senja, now a human member draw a jet to a letter. Then they get 20 because of the Takachi, 20 part of my watch. That in the show, a subject to the Majua in the Marinza. What are the Kongo combat Mato, Tomato, to a chicken? Something what the logic. Get what the chat.
So when we think of the figure of the Buddha, and as well as that, with all of the sentient beings all around us, all kinds of sentient beings all around us, regardless of what realm they are in, they are able to cognize and think with the human intelligence. And so we are all looking towards the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, with that really deep appreciation of the Buddha's qualities of body, speech, and mind, the fact that an enlightened being has no fear of the of suffering in terms of themselves, is skilled in means in removing the fear of others, is working for others with great compassion and without any bias whatsoever, and works to benefit others regardless of whether any benefit will come in return. So their motivation is completely and utterly pure and stainless. And that we, also recognize this really intensely special connection that we have with the Buddha. So should all sentient beings as well, in that he generated that mind of enlightenment for our sake, who trained on the path for our sake, and developed and ultimately attained full and complete enlightenment for our sake. And so we should not ignore that really intense kind of sense of connection that we have with the Buddha is there for us, to help us. So in order to really gain the blessings of being able to enhance our practice on the one hand, and to eradicate all ignorance with regard to the path on the other. And so we have that sense of the pure faith, the faith of conviction, the manifest faith, as all sentient beings sharing that sense of appreciation for the state of enlightenment. And then we ourselves looking at all sentient beings and recognizing the incredible array and intensity of suffering that they must undergo, develop this sense of unbearable, sense of wanting to relieve that unbearable feeling, which springs forth our compassion. And how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering, the cause of suffering, and may that be the case. I will see to it that is the case. O Guru Devi, please bless me to make this so. How wonderful if all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. And may that be the case. I will see to it that it is the case. O Guru Devi, please bless me to make it so. And so even though I have these beautiful aspirations, I realize how limited I am. I can't do this for even one person in any efficient way. But I know that the enlightened state, the state of a Buddha, can, because they have this long kind of purity of motivation that for the sake of all of us, they have generated the mind of enlightenment. For the sake of all of us, they have trained and refined that mind, and for the sake of all of us, have ultimately attained the state of enlightenment. And so from their point of view, they have the wherewithal to know what benefits should be given in order for us to ripen our minds, to ripen fully those that have been ripened, to ripen unripened minds towards the state of enlightenment. And so it really is clear to me then that there is no choice about it, but I must attain that state of enlightenment in order to also be so efficient at benefiting sentient beings, and stay with that to generate that mind of enlightenment sense of benefit for all sentient beings.
我的那种大概在这这个说的尊重给，你这个说的千年叠，大概深圳个，他甚至他这个都是3届公报准备切图，我到一般我的那个公报写进，我的什么写进，我的这个，特别我们公司本来呢，我公司本来我的写进，
And so it is within to remind ourselves that we are here listening to teaching from the Bodhisattva's way of life, with the intention of really integrating that into our own minds towards gaining that state of enlightenment that is being talked about here in the text, that we are wanting to benefit sentient beings by attaining the state of enlightenment. Shokandi Gyatang Jume Som.
Shabacha, what in the Chantaka, and the Sungo, Jumsen Sungo, what in the Niba gave a Shabatla. Give a Shabacha, what is it? What they give a Shabacha. Or the Takata, Tambos, the Suncha. And the lovers saw the tabla Samsung, Samsung, Tabba, Tabata Shisha saw, Tabata Shisha saw. La choba chamba dance chamba de sheshen sep so choba la lava chuche ana lava puson choba ya la ko stamba de la sumja semsung tamja sunga de jumche ta semsung wala ana semsung ya tamja sunga jwa wotja ta de jumche de semsung ya tamja sunga jumche de ni chen ta nyaba semla ra le ba ta yonde semla ra le ba wo chen subject nature. Tambo the never similar rather but the sumja and to luda because of lula requata don't do what the subject sum what is it?
And so we are on the chapter related to, or it's kind of like whose intention is to demonstrate how it is we should protect our mind through mindfulness and alertness, and emphasizing these two mental factors. And we looked at, they're saying that in order to protect our practice, we need to protect our mind. In order to protect our mind, we need to become proficient with mindfulness and alertness. And they're saying here that we're looking at an outline referring to the benefits of protecting one's mind. This has been dealt with briefly and then extensively, and now we're looking at the further elaboration on that through the reasoning behind what has gone before. Here it's pointing out that all fault is reliant on the mind, all qualities are reliant on the mind. And the first of these has 3 points to it. That is how the mind is kind of responsible for all fault. This is demonstrated from text, from the transmissional texts, from reasoning, and then there'll be a summary. So with regard to the first.
That long da ripata to also what the long da ripata to was the longer because that the yimbati same song rally by yimbati and the Sanjay lonely soon to them and repeat that papa jumsing to the papa to was soon. That long that Gada Jigwa Tamja down, Dunga to Navaya, similar to what you know, Yanda Sumba Niki dance. What I got Yanda Sumba Niki dance, what the Zawa teacher, what the
And so then the reference to a textual source for this is demonstrated in verse 6. The perfect teacher himself has shown that in this way all fears, as well as all boundless miseries, originate from the mind. And so the reasoning starts with then saying that all fears of this and future lives and all boundless sufferings originate from the negative mind state, and that this is something that has been truly expounded by the Buddha, the one who has become completely enlightened. And so again, it's quoting from a particular sutra. Gin Temple. So I can't get the name of the sutra itself, but in that sutra, it's quoting that the Buddha has stated that once we gain control of the mind, we gain control over all phenomena. So saying yes, so saying that if we don't have control of the mind, then the mind itself can be an enemy. And so leading to the end of that reasoning is to say that apart from the mind, really there is no other enemy. So if we have control over that enemy in the mind, that kind of unruliness of the mind, then we have control over all external enemies. So it's like saying the example of wood, that when it's on fire, it consumes itself. And in the same way, we relate this to the mind, which has the capacity to really harm itself. And so we can say that the power is there within the mind to go either way. And so it's kind of saying we can boil it down, saying from the uncontrolled mind, suffering. From the controlled mind, happiness. And so it's really whether we experience happiness or suffering depends on the degree to which we have control over our mind, about what is actually happening internally rather than externally. So it's an inside job. We have to gain that inner control. And so therefore we can see the big kind of the reasoning behind this verse, that all fears and all sufferings arise from the negative mind state, and that this is something that has been expounded upon truthfully by the Buddha himself. So the second of the subheadings was then establishing this point through reasoning. Verses 7 and the first half of verse 8. Who intentionally created all the weapons for those in hell? Who created the burning iron ground? From where did all the women in hell ensue? The Mighty One has said that all such things are the workings of a negative mind.
Shamali Don la sa babse chebe was a moso bime de dajan de da jushen chile chung jume le jang mi chung ye denda de da tanje jang rang rang ji dixen le chung tu ba sa je chom de de sung so she ba wo cha.
But these verses are establishing emphatically the source of suffering, and here it's talking about the suffering of the hell realms, etc., arising from the negativities in the mind or on the mind, we can say. And the question is asked, who intentionally created all the weapons for those in hell? Well, we can say that the very rebirth in hell arises from powerful negativities on the mind that have been generated through ignorance, and then one of the three poisonous attitudes through which the action had been motivated, laying down these karmic imprints on the mind, which are then awoken by craving, grasping, and existence. For example, at the point of death, where we might feel a chill in the body, and we have this desire to be heated up, to kind of feel some warmth. This can trigger these imprints to kind of like throw us from that life into the hot hells, for example, and all of this we have to understand has been established from the negativities that we have on our own mind stream. These are created from those negativities. So when it asks who intentionally created all the weapons for those in hell, the swords and the spears, etc., they are created by our own minds. And the burning iron grounds, that where have they come from? The women who appear at the top of the Shalmali tree, or at the bottom when we are going up and down to follow these women up and down. These have all been created from our own minds, from our own imprints. And so this is the reality of the case. So that they don't arise from any other cause. They don't arise causelessly. They have all arisen from the negativities that we have on our own mind stream. And this is something that, again, has been said by the Buddha himself.
이나 양고 랩톱 첨부 여든 제도 딱 ቄ 데르시면도 최고면도 배나 다니엘 ቄ기나 다가로 다니엘 ቄ가도 동갈 나가텔라 다니엘 그 랩톱 첨부 요거지나 다니엘 ቄ데도 야 사보게 나와 차니 정말 중로잖아 삼삼지 이 세바께 모두 아니 레틀 뉴버테체네 아니 대게도 ቄ제도도 ቄ 충주지만 고만다 유사 차이나 다 유사 매바니 ቄ 그저체네 유매는 가야제도 말이야 거기 가서다 딜레케게다 규조 현지 지경의 사면나 가서다 년龄이 규도 사면나 현지 지경 그게 제동문도 와. 다 이내 유사사와이나 아니 개 충중지게 제도도 와. 다 근데 이마이자 먼저 뒤준도 네 가서다 개처보 인다데 랑기 동네 중앙 이마이네 자주가 셈고 이게 중앙에 장주가 생각 내가 차도가 빼나 치가 나가들라 된대게 장외게 나와 차원도 오다 심제 생게 장외 동에 가리 봐 니한테 고쳐 봐쇼 삼삼로 땅아 이마이나 녀솔이 게게 내 요바네 레디 가도 살봐 대가라 장주가 셈데 시켜토나 오다 지금 차외게 나와잖아 저 정부 중나서서 오다 내게 나다 다 장외 나와 찬 장외 동네 지용도 심제 셰 다 수임바네 된데 장화의 동네 여행에도 되게 대다 탐자 녀들 미바쇼 녀들 고쳐바쇼 아니 대다 탐자라 대 장외 동네도 마요쇼 스타트데 삼로 땅도 마이나 랑라 녀송라게 랩톱 첨부 줘바이네 레드 가도 살바 디캅도 셈 된데 삐다고 깨온데 아니 딜라테네 야 레상부질라 쇠땀네 대자 거기 교화당의 소소를 지금 도와 다디인데 거기에 김내 장주가 셈콤 누구네 장주가 셈콤 갱에 람도 캐토바 제스가 단 내가 저서 차대도 와 셰게 충주지가 년을 깨주고도 와 다가자 규톱 첨부 유행을 와
So we have to understand that, in terms of karma and the imprints that are on our minds, that it can only take a very minor kind of cooperative condition that might then awaken the potential for a much more powerful karma to awaken, especially at the time of death. So we kind of have to be really kind of like careful, mindful at that time, and that for example, when we are at that point close to death, it can be very normal, natural for us to feel chilled, to feel a bit cold, and to have the automatic desire to feel some feeling of warmth. But if there are powerful karmas on our mind stream, that can act as the cooperative condition to kind of trigger those kind of like imprints to start to realize their full potential. And that would mean that we are then projected into that kind of reality of our heart hell. And similarly, we may be feeling stuffy and warm at that time, feeling the desire for some coolness. And again, that sort of can trigger something as simple as that, can trigger these much more insidious, larger karmas to awaken and to propel us into the cold hells. And so in that case, we have to really understand that we have to sort of have something in place that can kind of trump those natural feelings of heat and cold, for example, or anything else that might arise at that time. And that is, of course, the habituation we have to the mind of enlightenment itself. We, as I've constantly been pointing out, that we have to become aware during our life that any suffering that arises, we immediately connect it to our cultivation of the mind of enlightenment. That any happiness that arises, we immediately connect it to the cultivation of the mind of enlightenment. And so it's like this, that we our fallback position, our natural way, what naturally arises in the mind will be this training that we have habituated to during our life when we are healthy and in control. And so that we can, for example, that coldness arises at that time, and we can simply project out, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free of any cold, any discomfort of cold, and may all their discomfort and suffering like that arise upon me now, ripen upon me now, so that they may not have to experience such discomfort. And so you kind of really take control, take the reins into your own hands, and therefore you have created the cooperative conditions to ripen a sound, positive karma that will therefore propel you into a positive rebirth. And so that's the way to do it. And it depends on really how much control you have over the mind, how much training and habituation you have towards that thinking at that crucial time. And so it's kind of like very important that you have that that understanding that this can be your reality at this time, but that if you have that control over the mind, then you have control over that situation.
연구도 왔다. 말아서 미디 야구민도 삼사잖아요. 미셔봐 지금 미디 야구 쉬고 통한데 미 야셔봐 지금 미디 라 가부 용해 미디 되는 거야 미디 개년이 돼 용도. 어떻게 용되기도 다 되가 라라한 게 아니 레기 넘버 미발라 때네 넘버 미발라 때네 그거 차로고도 와. 차로고도 와. 다 되가 소속에 지금 뭐 쳐야 되는 거지. 삼로 야구 다는 삼로 야구 다는 뭐 쳐야 되는 거지. 또 다 되가 딕셈을 좀 봐도 뭐 쳐고도 와.
So it's like really important that we kind of look into verifying the truth of what's being stated here from our own experience as well. And it's quite common to see that we have this statement that from great negative karmas arises on very great undesirable suffering. But we also know that, you know, in our own experience that we have different relations with different people, like that on meeting people, sometimes we have this sense of dislike towards them, that their facial expression is something that turns us off. The very sound of their voice is something that we find unpleasant. Why is that? You know, and we have to relate that to negative karmas. And on the other hand, we have people that we meet for the first time and immediately have an affinity with them. We love to hear them speak. We really have a pleasant reaction to the way they look and so on. And we see that very inconsistency shows us that karma is at play. That people arise according to their appearances, arise according to the karma that we have with them. And so that can easily be extended to understand that this operates over lifetimes as well, and not just in the course of this period of time. So it shows that the mind is paramount. The imprints that we have on the mind very much dictate the reality that appears for us.
라마조 송주나도 루규된데 송그래 단다데 가서 녀마 별라 아니 라마지게 바 간주고 롱난데베 칼라 간주고 간주고다 트랜스포메이션 롱난데 아니 디나네 미지게 간주 롱나바 촌 제고요 마사 라마데게 아니 저거 슈디가데 샤사데바 포먼도 롱나바 촌 제고요 마사 보다 소소 레고 온게 다 리치르다 레 마다베 온게 다 디베기 온게 아니 나에데 라마데 샤스 쳇데바 나자 미용다기 라마데 숭주 나데 간주 롱나바데 돈티고 얘는 소수도 다 소수기 레그 넘버 미바 다 자와차고 보다 세버도 와 어떤데 용되지
양가견라 그거 남바 자민들 와디 그거
그래 다 소수기 맞다 다 녀마 된데 루규나 송고도 왔다 근데 가서도 소수 레그 난다지 아니 라마치게 아니 간주기 아니 가서 트랜스포메이션 간주고 롱나베 칼라 미용다 라마데 간주 롱나와데 통되고 고고 여는 냥거 디나는 냥겐게 아자치게 롱나와데 통고요 말이야 라마게 샤사데와 통되고 샤사된지 다 소소 레그 온게 난다지 뭐든지 온거다 다 이제 피게 요구고마다 소소게 레그 톱체종 온게 난다미다 요되겠지
Again, the power of the karmic appearances again is relating to a previous incident apparently in Tibet, where a particular Lama was giving a transmission of the entire Kangyur, all the actual words of the Buddha, and to most people listening, that's what appeared to them, that he was giving this transmission. But to one person there, that they did not see the Lama giving a transmission of the Kangyur, but rather that all they could see was the Lama eating meat.
And
so it shows that we see things differently according to our own karma.
다들 임바인도 다 어들레 제바인도 다 리베 공기 제바이나 다 간자지게 랑레 동해 용해 되건가 디가데 아니 수강의 소는 요 말에 딕셈 딜레테네 딕베기 랑기 딕베셈 딜레테네 아니 다 用这个有吧的大家就我做过去到我的想他说吧对吧你早晚了在几点送不呢sem了几块钱个没
And so then relating this to the point in the text where it points out that, yes, all of what's being created in the hell realms, the burning iron ground, females at the top and the bottom of the Shalmali tree and so on, all of it is a creation from our own, the negativities on our own minds. And that it's not something that's created externally by anybody else. And the third of the subheadings related to this point was simply a summary of what's gone before. This is the second half of verse number 8. Hence, within the three world spheres, there is nothing to fear other than my own mind.
다 근데 이 말자 대답이나 아니 직대나 다가 저 직대 숨보나 감송고 직대 숨다 거서 대다 간자 직대 숨나 아니 가서 숨보 탐자나 아니 라게 생기 제베 디발레 아니 직바 현재 가야면서 소소 생기 제베 디발레 직바 딜레 셴바 직바 가야 말이스 다 간자 라 미드베 동네 조라 강가 아니 지금 다 지금 셈디 마두베 온게 레사 올라 되는 용 되게 여러분 딜레 셴바 가야 말다 가야 매되겠지 근데 체디 동네이나 체치마 편제도 통마매번 용의 동네인바다 더더 지금 타바다 탐지치마 마도가 봐도 코알로 코데 링라 다 동네 근대신 연구 여바이네 셈 마두 발 때는 용 되게 여바지 아니 된데서 직바 딜레 셴바 직바 가야 말이스 매도 셴바 오차
So this point then is simply reaffirming what went before, that is saying that all of what occurs in all of the three world spheres, three world systems, is all of the suffering has been created by the negativities created in our own mind, all these spheres, and that from nowhere else, there is no other source for all of this. And it's kind of like really saying that all undesirable suffering has begun from the mind of ignorance. They're leading to the negativities that were created, laying the imprints on our own mind stream, and that everything that occurs for us in this life, in past lives, and future lives has all arisen from that source. That as long as we don't attain the state of enlightenment and abide in cyclic existence, that reality, that kind of like connection doesn't change. In other words, that everything that arises for us has arisen from, every suffering that arises for us has arisen from the negativities in our own mind, created by our own mind.
다 저거 야제 dro나 야제 치바이네 야제 마치마나 아니 치고부 야제 dro모도 가르쳐와 이바이네 대화 용 동해 용서 셈뒤 마들을 용거마도 치고부 여다 매기 라싸원인데 레고마 다 되건가 셈뒤 마들을 때는 용거 여바데 다 간제 저기 모트베 토네 아니 저기 셈뒤에라 다 배준 제고지 그리고 셈 마두바이나 아니 랑기 다 지가서 동해 탐제 아니 가서도 고치했다 버서지 로다 셈 디바이나 랑게 동네 탐자 권잡도 섭서 차기도 보다 되게 그가 어느 지금 셰베 돈에 다 가자 지가 소다다 배저 제디 개치버도 호텔.
So this only goes to show, to highlight the importance of the control of the mind, that any kind of improvement we can hope for, that we have, is reliant on, directly related to the degree to which we have control over the mind, and that here that all the suffering that we do experience, have and will experience, is arisen from an uncontrolled attitude of mind, and that we can close the door to that suffering by being able to gain control over our mind and what happens.
딱 지가서데 돔 잡데 셈뒤 마들라 라레기도 세데 다 셈뒤에라 아니 배주 제고야지 그러다 동에데 셈라되는 용구도 대화데 셈라되는 용구도 다 동에 셈라 용다데 와다 데데 용구도 뭐제나 것도 다 대화데 셈라되는 와다 셈뒤발라 셈마뒤발라 되는 동에 데데 용구도 다나 대화데 셈라 것도 어서 셈뒤발라 되는 아니 대화 용다 데데 용구도 아니 뭐제나 것도 So
it's a very definitive point here, isn't it? Really, it's really kind of saying, the mind is paramount, and indeed the degree to which you have control over the mind is the degree to which you have control over anything. And that here, we want every happiness, we want to eradicate every suffering, but it's saying that both aspirations are dependent upon the degree of control you have over your own mind, and you can do this. And it's showing that if you want to eradicate and reduce the suffering that you experience, you need to control the mind. And likewise, if you want to experience more happiness, you need to control the mind.
Yuende semla ralya bala ta yuende ta yuende digete ta digigi ta kaja jukaso de yongye ge junggun digete an semla ralya badet yuende digete semla ralya badet ralya bala tulesa ruata dute tuleta jimbada chudenda sobada chudenda samde de sherab ta digete an semla ralya ba hocham.
And so in that context, then the second of these outlines was that good qualities are also that which relies on the mind, good qualities that give rise to the happiness that we want. And this has 6 subheadings. They are generosity, ethical conduct, patience, enthusiastic effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom.
다 간제제 제다 셈께네 다 간제제 셈께네 아니 셈디 가서데 개발네 신게 아니 다 지가서데 셈제가 된다 연대 차통하지도 발라 아니 지소 바제도 남네 지고는 줘발라 보고 열와 다 줘발라 남네 아 디게 대다 가제제 셈 디게 대 셈라랄레도 같이 줘바 비다고 용다 뭐 용데 아니 셈 딜렉되네 셈디 아니 라테네 용되게 도와 텐데자 what to sungu도 다 다부 지마 셈라 랄레발라 니체 다부 지마 셈라 랄레발라 아니 집에 파져 줘봐 좋아 타다게 우바 보라 되바 마임바 아 동에 셈 공바 타침바 동에 셈 공바 타침바 줘봐 오제 그래 다가제 집에 파제 집 가서도 다가제 집에 파제 줘발라 아니 직대나 좋아 우버 매바 찾고 뜨고 말이었어 뜨고 말이었어 다 랑게 셈 동에 삼바 공미 동에 삼바 동셈 빼네 아니 공바 타치마나 동생거 공바 타치마나 아니 집에 파제 줘봐 대 셈에 되는 용되게 도와 줘봐 오죠.
And so, in brief, what this is really saying is, of course, through generating the mind of enlightenment, we enter into the practice of perfecting the 6 perfections. And that, again, we can see that all of this is reliant on the mind, the degree to which we can sustain that mind of enlightenment, the degree to which we can enter into the 6 perfections is all dependent upon how much control we have of the mind. So the first is looking at the perfection of generosity and showing how this is reliant on the mind. And it has 2 points to make. First of all, that they're saying that that the relief of all poverty of all sentient beings is not an indication of the perfection of generosity. That the generosity is perfected by perfecting a habituation to the mind of generosity, or one's generous attitude, perhaps.
And
that that so this perfection, or this perfect habituation to a generous attitude, that is pure in its one kind of 100% purity in giving, but has absolutely no expectation of anything in return.
And they got the Takaja particular to Adela, and it because of the Raji maybe that because of the Lois Simbacheco, Takaja, what the legend, what the Chaju sent the Tonga Niki, Lois Simbia Tone, and then because Takaja Tone Samba Pene, and then land the Namila Raw make it. But then the combat Nam Tachibana, and then Jimmy Pachin Yamlet touches.
And so, of course, to be an act of the perfections, perfection of generosity, like all the perfections, one's motivation has to be imbued with that mind of enlightenment, a sentiment, along with an understanding of emptiness, in instilling that into all of the actions that ensue from that motivation.
China Yang sa ke de doa u borwe chimbe paru China Yang dandon doden yona joba chida paru chens.
And so the first of these points then is in verse number 9. If the perfection of generosity were the alleviation of the world's poverty, then since beings are still starving now, in what manner did the previous Buddhas perfect it?
다들 Geshe 게데서 조화선제 탐제게 우어 매바찬 우어촌의 매바찬 대대게 집에 버리도 침바 라 뜨고 연어 좁아 가서 집에 버리 집어 좁아를 뜨고 봐 이마 이나 대대 집어 좁아를 뜨고 인 아니 다다보다 상기가 매스라고 지금 와 라고 지그래 그 다다 동에 두와 다다도 조화 제바다 강에 두와서 위시 풍과 연어 연합대 예배에서 다 열어봤다. 안 되는 거자 로다 대배 산제다 다다 산제시 맞게데 교바 산제남 지다 집에 버리듯이 막 그래 집에 버릴 수 막 줘버렸어. 줘버려. 맞소소 인터넷 켈레 그랬어. 집에 버릴 수 줘면은 아니 주님의 조금 말에 아니 가서 저번 조금 말에 다 내가 저보다 바지 누가 조금 말 다들 매도에 아니다 되게 되는 산제 고만 마도 같이 자고 그래.
And so this is coming in as a kind of objection to say if relieving all sentient beings of poverty were the qualification for the perfection of generosity, then since there are still people starving, then say in what manner has the previous Buddhas perfected the perfection of generosity? They haven't, have they? Because this is demonstrably so.
What did it? Yata, because of the Jimbe Parjans also the Shen Uba Meva Chagwada, because of the Kange Meva Chagwada, and the Dumas, and never told us some Kobata Chimba, Juaina, and the Tagarange, Zoba Resolo, Juani, Zawale, Dogba Tanje, Teche, Kibukula, Tansemji, Jimbe Parjans, so that they send it to watch it.
And so the answer comes in by, first of all, pointing out that the perfection of generosity has never depended upon relieving all sentient beings of poverty, that this is not the mark of having perfected the perfections of generosity. And so the second of these points, that the perfection comes from habituating perfectly to the attitude of generosity. Verse number 10. The perfection of generosity is said to be the thought to give all beings everything, together with the fruit of such a thought. Hence, it is simply a state of mind.
And Jimbe party the Chiba Sonda, Jimbe party the Chiba Zobach, Yongodes. The day in by that data, the day in by that Jimba Dene, similar rally, that Jimbe party touching margins, rang similar rally, similar rally by Ni no Shaba watch.
And so then this verse is stating that when all possessions have been kind of like dedicated to all sentient beings without any attachment, and together with all the positive ripening results of those acts, then this is the perfection of generosity, because it perfected the mental state, the mental attitude of giving, of generosity. Therefore, we can see how generosity, and indeed the perfection of generosity, is something that relies on the mind.
Reta Jimbe Party de Leta, Sazeki Chimbayo, Chugu Chimbayo, Mijibe Jogi Chimbayo, what a conjecture to get the Gangagi, what a dinner shit, Tiga Sunga, Kombatachi Machindi, and it Rangi. Because of that judge Jimbe, that what the Ganga touch Machinde, Rangi similar to Rally Tingich. Kombatachi Machilla Rally, what I think a Kachimachi, what the Pachai.
And so, of course, this is explained in the context of the different categories of giving: the giving of material items, the giving of protection to sentient beings, the giving of the Dharma. And in all of these actions, it really, whether it becomes a perfection of generosity, is dependent upon the mindset that accompanies the actions.
Zobasa, Sojiba, Simja, Sevala Dova, Miteba, Simja Savage Kogurve, Soji, Simja Meva Chawach Kogurve, Sena, Wata, Rota, Tudman, Sojopan, George, Rachida, Tudula Riba Buyote, and Zode Rota Kachachi, Sojopan, Sabadova, Miteba, and it Takar goes on a point Saba, Samba on Soba Juala, point Samba Soba Juatella, Takachi Juatella, and Surin Party since.
The second of these points looks at ethical conduct, and that showing how one's ethical progress is dependent upon, reliant on the mind. And this discounts the theory that the perfection of ethical conduct is attained when all killing of sentient beings is halted or stopped, and showing how this is an incorrect interpretation. And the second point is again that perfection is attained through the habituation to the mind of abandonment.
What shooting party Pajan Zobala, Soju, Simja, Sevala Doba Mitebani, Zawale, Nyala Soba, Kanshito, Teta, Sumi, Juba.
So, with regard to the first of those outlines, the first part of verse number 11. Nowhere has the killing of fish and other creatures been eradicated.
Nyala Sobeta, Soja Karibaine, Soja Karimen, Soja Manguteta, you can't see the data, Sujang Sudumeba, Juba, Tebate, 대다라 세담에 어떤데 제거 세담에 봐 영어 고에 보면 세담에 배자 나 추진제 파전 조바 소제제 심제 세발을 되고 많이 놓으셔 심제 소제제 심제 세발을 되고 저 말했어 세발도 다가제 코마동보다 세두고 말와 어떤데 뭐 많이 놓으셔 어째
And that showing the objection comes in that so many fish and just amongst many different sentient beings, whatever is living really, are constantly killed and lose their lives deliberately, and saying since that this happens everywhere, and so many people engaging in it, then that this can't lead to the perfection of ethical conduct. And it's saying yes, that's correct. That is not the definition of the perfection of ethical conduct. The perfection of ethical conduct is the mind which is kind of like a really abandoned the very notion of killing, and that it doesn't rely on the eradication of death or killing of sentient beings in general, but one's own mental capacity to completely avoid killing.
And
again, this point then that the perfection of ethical conduct comes from the habituating to the mind of abandonment. The second half of verse number 11. For the attainment of merely the thought to forsake such things is explained as the perfection of moral discipline. And so they're saying that it has been explained in Sutra that the overcome the abandoning of the mental attitude to kill or to engage in stealing or sexual misconduct or any other of the negativities, that when we fully habituate to that mind, this is what then attains the perfection of ethical conduct. So the completion of an incident of ethical conduct, refraining from killing, recognizes that there is a sentient being as the object, that there is the danger of killing, and that one deliberately refrains from engaging in that action, and one sees the fault of killing, and so one refrains from engaging in that action. And that is the perfection of ethical conduct, or the protection of our ethical conduct. So when we perfect that, in maintaining the motivation of mind of enlightenment and emptiness, that we perfect the perfection of ethical conduct.
soba sembla ralebalo sum da ralebalo sum denta peta ane pedon chawa was pedon chawa tambo denta la chawa le semje misun nangwa she data shomje yongmila ane kasa chowe semde jikjomna dade tamje chomda das.
So the third of these points is, of course, the patience, and that's showing how patience also relies on the mind. And this is going to be dealt with in three subheadings. One is the meaning, then there is the example, image, and then there is the conjoining of the meaning with the example. So the first of these is verse number 12. Which says, unruly beings are as unlimited as space. They cannot possibly all be overcome. But if I overcome thoughts of anger alone, this will be equivalent to vanquishing all foes.
Soba zobe chinanje jasebala dewa mares da semje misumba na kasa da misumba so da gyuma duginge ani da kasa jobana so wachigdo da kaje nanga shindo 타예바 인사 대다 점지 용말 다 대다 봐 점가도나 대다 매버 소가도나 그 소토에 거는 용말 그래서 점지 그래서 점지 용대 되는 민가에서 다들 쇼토가 자오는 용거 말했어 뭐는 갈라도데 너가 지금 야패쪽으로 와 그래도 그 숙소에 저거 말해 다 가릴 때는 와서 란주게 초에 셈데 란주게 그래서 셈전을 초에 셈디 아니 저 초나 아니 초와이나 아니 팽그도에 누구도 어디다 잡아채네 안 딩여바니베 토네 데 셈기 가서다 초에 셈디 지구 좀 봐이나 초에 셈디 아니 내마도 봐 소도 봐이나 내마도 봐서 다 좀잘 삼로다네 아니 데 팬더 내방 워시베 토네 아니 좀네 아니 치료가 다 되다 탐제 초받은 타베 콘도 줘발라 배고서 셔보죠.
So saying here that the perfection of patience, it does not depend upon eradicating all inner and outer enemies. If we try that, kind of we never get around to overcoming all unruly sentient beings who are as numerous as space, limitless, in other words. And if we try that tactic, not only will we not overcome our enemies, but we will increase our enemies. And so it's saying here that this is not the way to go about it. That if we overcome the mind of anger alone in our own mind stream, that is equivalent to overcoming all external enemies. And so that's what we should really strive to do, to overcome any thoughts of anger in our own minds by, looking into it from valid reasoning for doing so, of seeing the faults of anger, of seeing the benefits of having a mind free of anger, of having no place in your mind for anger.
Emotion kind of draw the nobody never saw to him. Nobody never saw the nobody never saw it. What you can do, Kanisha. What you can do, day and shape a toner and nobody can never so good. That deep never saw the Karisana, soil Kasana, Rangi never sent the member, sent the some of the multiple ten join by son, Tim never saw a top share your mother's wheel.
And so saying here that, this is all about really being aware of the reality of any given situation. That if we have somebody who is harming us in our space, in our reality, that we will not eradicate that harm by eradicating that harmer. That we cannot do so by generating the kind of angry emotion to overcome that harmer. That the actuality of the situation is that we need to gain an understanding of what the circumstances are in this situation, any given situation, and that by being able to do that, by being able to proceed with an even, calm, reasoned mind, we can therefore eradicate the harm in that situation. And so it's kind of like understanding that it all depends on the mind, and that the exacerbation of any given situation is due to the incorrect thinking that we bring to that situation. And so it behoves us then to really invest in reasoning based on the reality in front of us. And the second of these verses illuminating this point comes from verse number 13, where it states, "Where would I possibly find enough leather with which to cover the surface of the earth? But wearing leather just on the soles of my shoes is equivalent to covering the earth with it." And so this example then is kind of pointing out that maybe one has a fear of one's feet being pricked by thorns or bindis, and that one, in order to avoid that kind of harm, concludes that therefore I need to cover the entire area, the entire world with leather, so that my feet are protected. But where would we find that much leather? Saying here, if you actually just think a bit more and say, I can simply make a pair of shoes, leather shoes, and that will protect my feet, and that if I have that, then that's equivalent to actually covering the whole earth with leather anyway. And so that's the reasoning behind it, or that's the example. Sorry.
어디로죠? 딱 이제 개치주대 딱 이제 저기 가소래 딱 이제 그래 딱 이제 당연히 예를 주어는 샘도 마도다 아 근데 전에 용은 되기도 코로 사야다 가리는 너바 탐제도 다 나가는 데는 용은 되기도 라도도 뭐유게 내주 마시면 돈 용도 되기도 딱 이제 뭐유게 내주 심바 이마이나 뭐유게 내주 심바 이마이나 아니 저기 가소래 딱 이제 신배도네 아니 뭐유게 내주 투배 뭐유게 내주도 투배도네 아니 저 강에 세다 뭐유게 내주 투배도네 콘도 마요에 탑지치에 뭐유게 내주 토네 아니 디지투베 말아서 그가 디지 고고 요래. 디지 가르거스나 뭐이게 내주다 미팅 베토네 디지 두가도 아니 디지 두고 요마 아니 콘도사가 요마 마지마 용고 요라. 다 뭐이게 내주도 뭐 트베토는 뭐이게 내주 트베토네 치바이나 아니 너가 용에 매되겠지. 너가 용 매되겠지.
And so here is simply illuminating what is most important, and again that is the control over one's mind. This is what's being indicated here, and it's showing that all harm arises from the mind, our own mind, and our own mental attitude. And what's paramount is this control of the mind combined with a knowledge of the actuality of the situation. Because if we know what the actuality of any situation is, then we can proceed in harmony with that actuality. And so we can avoid any anger arising in the mind, and we can ensure that happiness will be the result. And so it's very important that we kind of take the smart kind of decisions based on knowing the reality and proceeding in harmony with that reality.
suma pedon jawa ne zawale deshe chiri ngoboya daje chido milanje daje semde chido che shena dogo jishi gweche.
And so the third point, of course, was looking at the meaning, the example, and then conjoining or showing how the meaning relates to the example and the example relates to the meaning. Verse number 14 will clarify this. Likewise, it is not possible for me to restrain the external course of things. But should I restrain this mind of mine, what would be the need to restrain all else?
What is it? That petition to Chiraki Nature Jongobo Yang Tadas, Dagi Chitoba De, Shomba Milan de Toba Shomba Cheto, because Takaja Yontu meeting it. Daji Semki, Nigella Mingnas of Kondokabale, Chitoba Chawosata, Kondokabati, and it's because of the Muyuki Matuma Samotani Kigo Yamasa, until it Tobachigo, Tobachate. The legend is a Toya Yu Shannon, Dogo Chishi Quete, and we go to Shamocha.
And so here it's saying when we try to restrain all external phenomena which is limitless, we can see that's a fruitless task. That there's no sense in trying to do that. But if we kind of focusing on the object that is harming, gaining the reality of that situation, and then turning the possibility of any generation of anger around so that it never occurs, never arises, that is then sufficient. That then we don't need to kind of restrain anything else externally that is occurring. What need there to be to get rid of all of everything else. We have control over the mind alone, that suffices.
Semse Chige Trebukan, Sangla Soba Yimbata, Luna Jebe Trebuyo, Juba Shebe, that means.
The fourth point was that effort relies on the mind. Verse number 15, although the development of merely a clear state of concentration can result in taking birth in Brahma's realm, physical and vocal actions cannot so result when accompanied by weak mental conduct.
Shene da tenga zela tene, taka ja shene da tenga zela tene, ani chiga Devu, Changbe Chidela, so Tala Soba, Nesu Keva Yimatar, come Komali Cake, Rota was a Rota Kaja Deve, Devala, Gurdu Dene, and come Goma, Rota Kaja. Come come semta something mushila soba the community chenela then something mushila soba community nyamjugi give a table sala sobias and nesu give a yimatar sat kasoda takajachi kajachi kasoda come komala give a den sungam nel give a tar lunga da chebe simji tebu yangsan kasoda toa chue rather chue juba shebe dead with tan neso so get to a mission was Takaja Luda Nag to get there, and this goes at the Casode, Chicasode, Takaja, Juba Sheba said that to get there, and Chicasode, Casode, Takaja, Tanda Casode, me and the same Ingle, and Chica, same Ingle, Chebaina, and what the negative, and someone is young bodies. And
so this verse is referring to different levels of meditative concentration, and that where one has the delight of mind entering into a particular meditative absorptions related to the generation of the mental quiescence and the attainment of the higher realms. And so referring to, for example, the 8 forms of meditative absorption and so on. And it's saying here that the result of one of these is the attainment of the state of the abode of Brahma, it's referred to as. And that and so, but when one when we have like this, how do you say, distraction to other objects relating to our body and our speech and so on, that they compromise our capacity to generate that kind of concentration, and that we don't have the capacity to attain that state of Brahma through meditative absorption. And so it's kind of showing really the need for, again, control over the mind in terms of the effort that we need to apply.
Pena Tenga Comba in Rela, and take him a word so Lu out to the Kawakari Cheva in and the Tendegi Casole, Takaja, Chicasole. Things in the team mania betone, Takaja, Migba, and so Chicasole, Takaja, Chicasole. Devela similar, Yema to the Mebetone, and Jade Kitchen Borders, same Yewe Tone, and Candula Sobakari Cheva in there, and Kasoda, that devil never was a Tendega so me shaman is devil young to Marius. Until you may say, same my Yewe Tone Jade Kitchen Borders. Rather, Tenga Yambasha to the Indame. That dear mother, so the Gawakari Cheva and Gawati, same my Yewe Tone. Rather, to a sim, then.
So here it's referring to, generating meditative concentration, and it's really pointing out that if we are, not careful with our actions of body and speech, and we're kind of so easily distracted, then we cannot generate these states of concentration. And it's showing that this is not just relevant to developing elite subtle states of concentration, but indeed when we're focused on engaging in the saying of prayers or any virtuous activity, we need to have focus on that object. That whatever we are doing, that is what we're concentrating and focused on. If we're easily distracted from that, then we will not gain the results of the virtues that we are trying to do. And so it's showing really that in terms of the definition of the perfection of effort, it's the mind that delights in virtue, and we need to kind of be really focused and absorbed into that delight on virtue to bring about the required result of that action. So as in the definition of enthusiastic effort is that which delights in virtue. So that means that whatever we are engaging in, be it prostrations or saying of prayers, recitation, and so on, that we bring to it that mind of delight, that we enter into it with that delight. And of course, this depends on the mind, isn't it? Our mental attitude.
Pejala tene to samle to stangu yuto otene ane tene nga sa samle to ane ko lele che ime sora che ane yada mada che nga sa indecent che te ha to dirika sa ta mobile ta internet ta ganga la pe tagi chen changa sa to smendo ko shiwuji ka so de indical focus ching de ta shukchon de jogo do ta ko mune jana ko ta ji when the Tagi Tangi by the and Nasa Samlet or that Mikwa Jonjo Delata, Kochi Kadu de Mikwa Shachen, and what to do Sabway Kitchen Bora. That's Saya Katolako, and not the Lola Droted, not the Lola Drogi by any mobile phone tire, and internet tire, Tangita de Jonga. Tangita, what I did? Then the Mati what I think can't do Casole, Takajachi, Sosugi, the can't do Joy Sabeton, was to do can't do Tundugi, and the Caso de and Sini can't do sound tone, Javana, and what you love to put your good.
So that most of us have so too often experienced the kind of like say how our recitation of our commitments and are compromised, that where we might be doing particular commitments and reading and focused on that, and then when it comes to the point where we recite the mantras, we sit back and relax and just kind of like go into automatic recitation of the mantras. Meantime, we're thinking about mobile calls and what we saw on the internet and everything else taking over the mind, and we're not with our practice at all. And so this is what we're referring to, that we need that focus. We need to bring our best game to everything that we actually engage in, and particularly in this case, the kind of completion of our commitments, and that this really speaks to bringing that enthusiastic effort to play here, that which delights in effort, so delighting in this particular effort. And it's fully qualified enthusiastic effort when we can sustain our focus throughout and not simply take breaks during the course of our commitment.
Tangaba Samdela, Samde, that Diga, and a similar rally do. Similar rally do, that Casore Taka, Jimbata, and Casore Taka, Tsujimda, and the Takana Castle, Sobata, and the Takata, Juju the Ganga, and Diga Casole, and the Chicas, Sherabi, Pagina, Droda Moto, and the Juju bit to get the Ganga. Church of Droda Moto, some Lutanga, some Corala rally digitwa. And the party in the Droda Moto, because some Lutan, some Corala rally to what I got similar rally than the Sungu, like give it to get the Ganga, give it to get the Ganga, some Pitalu Latin, and it will Pitalu John digitwa. Because similar rally than it is Sungu.
And so, of course, all of these points that we're talking about, generosity, ethical conduct, patience, or enthusiastic effort, they all, again, making the same point that they all rely on our mind, or the mental attitude that we bring to those practices, that indeed, whether they become Dharma or not is dependent upon the mind, and naturally, whether they become perfections or not relies on the attitude. And so we have to be very clear that we are, in a virtuous, bringing the virtuous attitude to bear, and then to doing our best to make them into the perfections in order to hope for any results from those practices. But it shows how everything is dependent upon the mental attitude that we bring to it.
당가바 삼대 셈라랄레바니 자왈레 대주 당네 가두고 유링 뒤소 제제자 셈제예외 제바니 데니릭베 되메송사.
The fifth of these, the fifth perfection, is the perfection of meditative concentration, and how this relies on the mind. Verse number 16, which states that the knower of reality has said that even if recitation and physical hardships are practiced for long periods of time, they will be meaningless if the mind is distracted elsewhere.
Sunga Samo Teju Dani, and Nunela Sobias, Kato using Butu, Cheba Cheba Yinaya Chejang, Sem Shendo Yama Cheba Deni Ribe, that Deni Riba, Muyu, and Kebe Tabu, and was Sunday Chom de Deje, Demason, Sheba.
So it's simply saying here that if we engage in profound tantric recitations, or we engage in the hardship of doing a fasting Nyongne practice, indeed anything that we engage in, but if the mind is distracted in the course of doing that, then it has been stated by the Buddha himself, the knower of reality. He said that this becomes meaningless.
다들이 인상가라 섬려고 당도 하고는 다들이 가서 지금 tengen을 자는 지금 모바일 폰이나 가이나 인터넷에 가이나 네가 배주 나한테 개체물다 이나 칸도 제발 가서 칸도 라제 아니 검 잡아 가서 검 다대제 안다 칸도 제발 가서 강도도게 미과 존에 제디 개체물 되면은 야다 진줄 때는 뒤주 철라 주고 요거 숨고도 가.
We have to be, even more aware of this kind of problem in the era of mobile phones and devices, etc. That we have to be able to compartmentalize our kind of actions, so that when we're engaged in our commitments or the recitation of prayer and any other spiritual practice, that we are fully and 100% focused on just that we have to be determined to sustain our focus just on what we have chosen to do. That's extremely important.
La sobane tebu meba juros da debal yene debege debe yula sem yingne ane katu cheba ta katu chene da kawa chene kale jamne ta chuk to katu cheda ane kandu de la sobane roda katu da kandu cheba la sobane tebu meba juros da di tebu yongo mares so the tebu meba juros.
And so this is as pointed out in that verse, there is a sutra source for that. In the Meditative Concentration Sutra, the Buddha states, "O monks, if when you are engaged in hardship, spiritual practices, engaged in the recitation of prayers, etc., if the mind is distracted to objects of desire, then there will be no positive result to your actions."
The Darnishing Yumle, the Yum, the Sheriff of Palidu Chumba. Sheriff of Palidu Chumba, Yumle, same young one is a same young one, Daji Dunya, Daji Dunya Juba Mijuna, same young one, and the church about so to die to Gumaris, so to do the Drumadona, Shenka to the Tajimus, Shendaga to the Kawa to Guris, Tajimus.
So, as it says in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras as well, that when engaged in practice, if the mind is distracted, one will not fulfill one's own purpose. And so what needs to be said about fulfilling the purpose of others?
And the same area, Uncle Gomne, got some young, your Mijo, that's same young, and Jinamne Jetta, the cook up to take your mother's water.
And so therefore, you never give an opportunity for the mind to become distracted.
What you know, what the let and water, let and was in the young to it. You know, Marazo counts on a so young to it. So and down to Lani. Down to Lani, any young to it, that mixing that can't do it, the kitchen was go to the door. Down to Malachita was a let and water, semi young digger. They did the count to get young what shoots on the diet. How do the down to Malach? When a country to Lamja mobile, Lava China, the internet boy, the digital country to country Raja. Did you don't do the ticket? Did you don't know Tata Chetona? Tata Chetona.
And so, of course, we are beginners, and we will be distracted. I think, though, what is important is to bring that attitude to your practice, that you will do your best to avoid distraction in when and if distraction arises, that you will do your best to shorten that distraction. One thing we must not do is to kind of welcome distraction, to accept that the distraction into the mind and allow the mind to run with it. That's not acceptable. And especially when we are doing our specific recitations or commitments in practice, that we have no thought for what's the mobile, what happened on the mobile and what happened on the internet and so on, but that we are bringing 100% of our focus and 100% of our sustained attention just to that time, even if it's a very short time, that you go for absolute quality over quantity if necessary.
What did and Danish what did Takaja Rangi and that thing is in the same water because similar rally over the Taganishing Yamlek and Java in there, the Peter Yonda Moyon, and because of the same and you put temple shot to the Matula, then you want to get what.
So we have to say, forget about meditative concentration, but even any spiritual practice that you are engaged in, the quality of that practice is totally dependent upon the degree to which you can sustain focus on the object of that practice.
What is
And so let's leave it there for today.
Oh yeah, what did it say? Chicasore, that gives you an essential and you can't to get them to Tibet and Java investment in the kitchen. Tuba to that day, and the Lalenka to the Jimbas and can't to do get and Chicaso Lalenka along with the person chair, what did it say?
So therefore, just to remind us that any learning that we do, anything that we have assimilated here, it is the key point about it is that we must integrate it into our practice. That's extremely important. Try and make it part of our lives.
And how do that when Jaju Sembe Denechiki was a Lobson Cheba Galati, get you the guys, that get you the Jaju Semda, Tony Dobe, Sheriff Niti, that can't do it, and Gadasna Mechagu, study Cheba Gatola, and Kajan Carrions, or Kagan Yomo Chigura, and Yomo the Gandasun of Chegudu. What I think or Sungu. This was, and that day, Taco Kaila, can't do get, and that Lalenka the Trotte.
Therefore, we must also keep an eye to protecting ourselves from mental affliction, and that this is the way we engage in decent spiritual practice.
가진의 쉬임바 다 가지 가서도 지금 자주가 샘스긴다 자주가 샘기 아니 배윤다 되게 내 자주가 샘데 두게 아니 돈이 도배 셔라고 저 것을 럽종제 직제어도 다 가져서 딱 거저 미지 나로라 아니 가도이네 자주가 샘디 아니 지금 가서 줄에 깨답지에 마게바 깨베체 아니 깨바 마냐바 송예 아니 다가네 생기 지금 소속의 저 디기다 동네 그래 중화 이바이네 자주가 샘마게바 깨바 권에 권도 배 줄에 라비에 다가네 생기 내당 그래 스텝이네 아니 동니게 따와들라 아니 마게바 줄에 깨바도 권에 권도 배야 아니 삼로 땅에 와다디 디게 되다 강투도게 아니 배준제는 침바이네 아니 말아줘디 lok은 자와도 거쳐봐 소리 좀 물어봐.
So that this then is the kind of like the life sort of pledge that we make to ourselves, that we generate that mind of enlightenment continuously, knowing the great benefits of it, and that we train and study the theory of emptiness, so that to be combined in our motivation in whatever we are doing. And this should be kind of something that we kind of take on as a life, a pledge for ourselves, that the mind of enlightenment is something that may be born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore, as the prayer says. And likewise, with emptiness, may that born arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore as well. So that it becomes a part and parcel of us, to be able to have that attitude of the mind of enlightenment within, as part and parcel of our constant thinking, to recognize in every situation the reality in terms of the emptiness of the kind of the way things appear to us, as something that's extremely important.
지나가 추근데 시번에 이대는 좀 뒤선 요마리 선에 어디게 동네게 콜라 삼로 비자 가자들 로트샤 아니 데데 예베 로티 아니 그래서 라게 지원을 님의 경우 약하와 주소 삼선 더 약하와 주 님의 경우 약하와 주소 삼선 데네 심제 탐제도 산제 구만이 완전 토론 마도는 지금부터 토바지기 설로지게 안디 데데고 좀 받다 다외 경우 약하와 주소 삼선자 근데 바데자벨라 말은 뭐지 다게 조업이면 걸리시면 구수토죠 무도 zat서 데데 손데 제발라테는 담비 가서페 니베 가서 수베 가서 때도 주는 산제 구마마도 그부터 저소다 야보시고 좀 소선은 구마자.
So then we reflect on the mind of renunciation, and this thinking on renunciation, on gaining definite emergence from cyclic existence, and from that attitude of mind, the lotus mandala seat appears on our crown, and through then reflecting on the nature of reality, the lack of any inherent existence of self-entity, the mere absence of the object of negation, bringing forth the mind of emptiness, which is represented by the sun disk mandala seed. And this desire to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, the mind of enlightenment itself, bringing forth the moon disk mandala seed. on our crown as well. And then we express the invocation verse thrice. O glorious and precious root Guru, come take your lotus and moon seed placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. Following the first recitation, the figure moves from the space in front. At the end of the second, they have arrived at our crown. At the third, we have the certainty that they will remain until we attain the state of enlightenment, and rejoice in that.
And then because Yala do what Meditative and because of the Takaja Disciple Chatuna Bear, we are what the legend Takaja, he won't about to go the Eagle, some good, and then Disciple Luke on the Tibetan Gargon, Eagle, Tibetan Chachos, what the Gombashet to the Yamu, and then the Tani Sugar Chicken. Because of the what the channel. What is commercial?
And then we offer the mandala and the 7-limbed practice. And at this point, if we have the time, it's extremely good and auspicious to do the descending nectar light meditation, where we have the light streaming from the crown and the throat and the heart center, purifying respectively all negativities of body, speech, and mind.
And then Yajo Compassion in Jong Samlotane, and then they will lote, Rani the Pamata Jusu, some such a Tony to Beshara Kumba Yanjo She, and then they will lote, and then they give a lote, and because of the payment and because of the Takaja, you make him go. Because Yaka Jusu, some such a, and then subject Tamil, Saja Koma, no Toba Matona Timu, you want to Toba chicken, so the logic, and then they go to Bati. And the direct when Yaka choose, and the budgets of Elaman, Taringa material, Karisha Kusu to Jogo, so tell us the Chavatana, Nabukaso, Nibukaso, Subaka tension, Sanjay Kumamato, for the Chesotaya was shooting so much.
Now we begin to prepare a suitable seat at our heart center for our Guru Buddha. And here again, reflecting on renunciation brings forth the lotus mandala seat. And reflecting on the emptiness and the lack of inherent existence brings forth the sun disk mandala seat. And reflecting on the generation of the mind of enlightenment brings forth the moon disk mandala seat. Again, with the invocation verse, we recite, O glorious and precious Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first recitation, the figure on our crown moves down through our crown chakra into the central channel. At the end of the second, they have arrived to be seated at our pre-prepared seat. And at the end of the third, we have the certainty that they will remain until we attain the state of enlightenment. And that is something worth rejoicing in.
Or there is any Pamata and Ma Katsun, Nodining, Neta the Sine, and Diga the Dojic of Sanga Hache, and the Tagoto, and the Tibet Sanga, diet of monument, diet of monument, diet of monument, Mamuni sauce, and some called Tene, and then Jame and Sunga, Omara Bazanati, the Omara Bazanati, the Omara Bazanati, the Tenejigo, some called Tene. Then over yet on my head of another Mashaman is what the Eagle some called the water is a Rangi Ningi Yuso, Lama Tubia Ombo, Shuyu, some such a day, Shuati, Le, Kusu Tule, we said, Padu, Meva Trene, Rangi Chibone, Kandiga Balo, we said Chobalatene, and Rangi, because of looking not to the Leg Kani, Takaja, Toma members divide the tip of the Jida, Kaba to your soul, Majimala, Misama, Twintama, Tuga, nothing is a Lodalos, said Dilla Sava, Sengama, Dingama, Toma Map, Nasabi divide the tip of Nani touches, so Kumasha.
And then the petals of the lotus leaf fold over and are joined at the sealed at the tip by a 5-pronged white semi-vajra. They are surrounded, and that package is surrounded by 3 mantras. The first in a clockwise direction being the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha. The second, the mantra of Manjushri in an anti-clockwise direction. And thirdly, the mantra of dependent origination in a clockwise direction. Once that has been completed, light rays begin to emanate from the figure within, permeating through the petals, permeating through every atom of our bodies, from the crown of the head to the soles of the feet, and engaged in a powerful process of purification, whereby we purify all negativities and obscurations accumulated since beginning of time, concentrating on any of the 10 non-virtuous actions of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, of lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle gossip, of the covetousness and malicious intent and wrong view, and all of the negativities that we have accumulated in this life and in all previous lives.
Ana pada mala maguba kebono lobela maguba to samba sumba chola maguba simjeda debe legi bala sumba timba mijibo so dai jibo da shejo jeso yera wala so tona tore da tabe jeso koa da nyeso jo nyedong so chichi ma tamcha jache tamba jungsu samsacha anda ne lugi nasa semgi tunge an jungshi ko ma nyoba za long tile kyon khari ba teta tamcha pa dani an hakdondo da nyudo sanje ko ma tabale kyon chishude 탐행의 낭신 바라 탐행의 낭신 교연 탐제 단 가나탄제 다발음자 바지 차도와 야부 중수 섭섭하고.
We also purify any infractions of the Pratimoksha vows, the Bodhisattva vows, the Tantric vows, of any disrespect we have ever shown to people like our parents, to our preceptors, to our gurus, that any negativities that we have engaged in ourselves, that we have caused others to engage in, that we have rejoiced in the doing of, all these negativities related to the illnesses in our own body, the disturbances in our own mind, of any imbalances with regard to the elements and the channels, winds and drops, and in particular that which really impedes the greatest impediment to our quickly being able to attain a state of enlightenment, being ordinary view, that we kind of see the fault of that and transform that into pure view.
Lama shaja sanga kula jusu soso shido travel semde nyeleje lama shaja sanga tu de lenji chigenchen soso semde lama shaja sanga tula jusu range lunga yeso da lama shaja sanga kusu to yuko yeme jusu somse di tongba tongbe dewa de do nyesu me yishi keso soso kuba shashwa.
And then through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, together with the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of a Buddha. And then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, and the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. This is marvelous. I see that my own body, speech, and mind now are inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. This brings forth the understanding of emptiness, which combines with bliss, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
아니 란야사가 네데 네게 견탑제 전에 라마샤자스게 다베시도 조소선다 다란 라마샤자스게 구송도 뭐 예매주가 디 나라라시 메바지 고바샤 디 투갈레 안에 심제다 다라냐고 왜서 파 촌 초알라 때네 왜서 대다다 심제라라 수소 도마 심제대다 단제자 아니 지금 가서 깨지게 라마샤자스게 구송도 뭐 예매주소 선다죠 안 대다 내사게 네게 견탑제 다네 아니 가서 라마샤자스게 다베시도 조소 선다죠 오다 심제 탐제 라마사제 샤자스게 살아 꾸기서 단니마 데릴 것도 선을 가고.
So then the place that I am in is purified of all fault and transformed into the enlightened abode of a Buddha. Then seeing myself, of course, as indivisible from the body, speech, and mind of an enlightened being, and lacking any inherent existence, I send forth countless rays of light from my own heart center, equal in number to all of the beings in all the 6 realms of existence. Upon touching them, they are transformed and they are completely arise as fully enlightened beings. That the place that they are in is also transformed of all thoughts and transformed into the enlightened abode of the realm. And this really is marvelous. Today I fulfilled my ultimate objective of leading all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment. That is absolutely wonderful. I totally rejoice. And then that this leading of all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment, the virtue that has facilitated that, and myself as the doer of that virtue, the agent of that virtue, completely lack any objective existence, even at the atomical level, and are merely imputed by thought. Just to focus on that point, we gain a sense of bliss arising, which combines with emptiness, and we abide in wisdom of knowledge, bliss, and emptiness. So, of course, we are operating at the level of imagination here. How can this happen so conveniently? Not possible. But nevertheless, I make a profound dedication that I will, just as we are thinking here, I will make this actually really manifest. And in doing so, I will accumulate all the conducive conditions to support, and I will eradicate all inconducive conditions, obstacles, and so on, to make it happen as quickly as possible. You are Avalokitesvara, great treasure of compassion, not aimed at your existence, and Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception, Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snow, Los Anjakpa, at your feet, I make requests.
Okay, thank you very much.